Thank you so much for joining us. Stefan and Ben were just amazing, so I'm going to do my best. So here we go. I am a qualitative researcher. I'm talking about activity-based research interactions. Just a quick introduction to Twig and Fish. We're a qualitative research agency based in Boston in the United States, but I identify as a Canadian Bostonian, so my Canadian peeps out there, hello. So, yeah, I like that whistling. So basically, we're all about the positioning and the practice and the power of doing qualitative research in organizations. Really resonated with what Stefan had to say. I was looking at his little diagram. You guys remember the diagram he beautifully drew. When you get that low point, sometimes that's when you really need to leverage research practice to be able to give you inspiration to move forward. We were chatting about it at break. Same thing with the organizational culture. Really inspires people and gives them a moment of collaboration when they have a human story to anchor things in. I'm also just going to say we're not a pub. Just saying. Because a lot of people are like, wow, you work at a pub? That's so awesome. Maybe V2.0. We'll see. But there we are. Handles are there. Let's keep moving. So what I want to talk to you about are major tasks in a qualitative study arc. If we're looking at learning from people, we realize that there are certain moments and details that we have to go through. I just want to share our sort of position, what I'm going to be talking about in our 5-phase learning process that we use regularly. Guys who are in my workshop, you'll remember this. It's really important to position exactly where we are and what we're talking about so that we have language to go back to. We have our first step where we start to hear from our stakeholders about questions that they have. How many of you have stakeholders who have sort of emailed you a question and say, hey, can you go do a research study on this? Anybody get those kind of requests? Yeah, you're out there, I know you are. And what you want to do is sort of organize those questions and understand that study intent so that you have great clarity moving forward. Once you grab that information and you understand the study scope, you're then going to do what we most normally do, which is to talk about who are we going to learn from? Recruiting. How are we going to learn from them? Understanding your protocol that's going to sort of give them that platform to articulate their thoughts. We then move into gather, which a lot of people think is all researchers do, is you just ask a question. What's the big deal? But there's more. So what we want to do here is actually do a really good job of executing on our plan. We want to make sure that we can actually capture, we can debrief with people who are listening, and gather those human stories in a way that's really memorable and meaningful. We all know, of course, if we have data, we then have to analyze it. That is our phase 4. All we do is sit down and tell stories. We want to sort of deconstruct the stories and reconstruct them into really meaningful insights. And then finally, apply. Apply is not Dropbox, it's not present, it's not report, it's not drive. It is apply because we want to take those findings and move them forward. If they simply sit, that means we haven't done our job. But what do I want to talk about today is actually 2 and 3, really talking about creating that protocol, that platform to get people to articulate their thoughts, and really how it actually activates when we actually get into this phase 3 gather, okay? So, how many of you have ever asked yourself this question? How do I ask the right question? Anybody done that to yourselves? Yeah, I know, you're all out there, I know. We're gonna get rid of that, okay? Let's just get rid of that. So the struggle is real. Are you ready for this? I love these, all of these Medium articles, with my favorite being the last one, 98 questions. Wow. Note to self, don't ask 98 questions. People will run away, and that's not a good thing. So please don't do that, but this question keeps on popping up. My ask of you is to remove that from your acumen completely. It's not about the right question. What we want to do is give people a moment to figure things out. Let's talk about that. So what we're going to do is sort of, in this little moment, unpack that dynamic of asking and answering questions, because that's really what we're after. So let's ask about who's involved. I'm sure you guys can guess. We typically have people. Somebody asking questions, the researcher, they're articulating their learning objectives, so they're asking their questions, and we do have participants. And those are the people who are sort of trying to formulate an answer. They're trying to muddle through and get you information that's going to be helpful. But there's a few things we want to call out here. How many of you feel it's hard to ask good questions? How many of you sort of feel that moment of angst? Yeah, right? And we have our own biases and assumptions, so it's hard. We also have certain wording and jargon that we like to use that sometimes we forget other people, normal people, don't understand. And we also have this thing about pressure and time sensitivity. We have to get all this information in that moment of time and make sure that it makes sense to us. And there's much more. But what about the other side? It's actually harder for them, guys. It's actually hard to answer questions. How many of you feel that you've seen like participants, they feel like they're on display, right? Like, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I see the smile. They're on display. There's no big picture understanding of what you're actually trying to go after. So they keep on going, did that help? Did I answer your question? Am I getting warmer? What's going on here? And they don't have a lot of time to think. I don't know how many of you wake up in the morning and go, I am ready for somebody to ask me the last time I financially invested anything. You don't think like that, right? You're probably thinking like, holy smokes, where's the coffee and can I get out of house on time, right? So those are the details that we tend to focus on. But researchers, the other aspect here is we are very fortunate. Even though we feel nervous in that moment of asking questions, we have soaked in that problem space, and I mean soaked. You are getting up thinking about financial investments, you're thinking about how your application comes together, what are your to-dos for that day. That is all you live and breathe. And you know your learning objective. You know where you're headed. You've gotten in your car and you are going from Lisbon to Madrid. You know where your destination is. And you also know how you're getting there. Am I going to go on the highways? Am I going to go on the off-beaten roads, by the water maybe? You know all of that, and you have so much power when you have that knowledge. But sadly, our participants don't. And that's what I want you to think about just for a moment. They live in their own reality. They don't think about what we're thinking about. And quite honestly, they're unaware. They don't unpack the details. I know some of the people in my workshop heard me say this. When we just sort of ask a bulleted question, sort of that silver bullet question like, how does this make you feel? And they go, happy. We go, check, happy. And then we go, 5 people said they were happy and 10 people said they were not. That is not what qualitative research is, my friends. It is not that. We need to describe happy. Were they happy because they achieved something? Were they happy because they just fell in love that morning and it has nothing to do with anything else? Did they just have an awesome cup of coffee because the person upstairs just knows how to make the perfect cup of coffee? We need to describe that. So just silver bulleted questions that get a silver bullet answer, it's not fair. And a lot of times we expect that silver bullet answers. And what happens if they don't give it to us? You walk away and you go, oh, I had a terrible user. I had a terrible participant. Didn't go well. It's not their fault. That's on us. So what we have to do is think about this a little more deeply. And if we think about it, participants especially, they don't all communicate the same way. We expect, how many of you have friends, your friend circle, when you ask somebody a question, they're like, how was your date? Great. What are you going to do tomorrow? Don't know. Right? And you're just like, dude, throw me a bone here. Like, what's going on, right? You just don't know how to get them going. You need to get them going. You need to give them a little bit of fuel to get them excited. We also believe that every one of us can articulate perfectly. If you attempt to ask me a question in the morning, good luck. That's all I'm going to say. You're not going to get much of an answer, and it's going to be monosyllabic probably. But it's hard to be succinct, to have a clear thought, to think with clarity, to deliver with clarity. It's very hard to do all this. And I do love this one. I'm just like, wow, we're talking about robotic vacuum cleaners. Like, isn't this awesome? And they're just like, what do you want to ask me? Just please, let's just get this over with. So it's hard, right? We are trying to meet these emotions all over the map. We're trying to make sense of them. So the question is, if we just focus on that right question, it actually feels more like an interrogation, right? You sit there and you're like, tell me about this, then this, then this, and you just keep moving down the path of your questions. And what I'm asking you to do is think about a space to sort of nurture reflection. Think a little bit more about how you can have fun with it. Because
Good afternoon. My name is Russell, and I am a wilderness explorer in Tribe 54, Sweat Lodge 12. Are you in need of any assistance today, sir?
that's not how we do it. We don't read. How many of you put together the discussion guide and craft the questions and the words, and then you never actually read it, do you? You don't. We know that. All of us in here. So we don't read it exactly as it's worded. So what are we going to do? And what we want to do then is I ask you to reframe that entire interaction. Think about it differently, okay? So what I want to ask you to do is think about in your minds some typical questions that you have. You know what I mean by typical questions. There are questions that we tend to ask in some frame, in some format, in every interaction that we have. Let's go with the first one. How many of you have ever asked sort of a retrospective question? When was the last time you ... Anybody ask those kinds of questions? Right? We want to start somewhere, right? Good place to start. How many of you might feel that if somebody asked you that question and you really didn't know what was going on, you would have a perfect story to go back to? You would have that moment immediately. You can just grab it out of the air. It's really hard. And then we follow up with questions like, okay, when was the last time you traveled? What made you think about traveling? Why did you travel? Who were you traveling with? And it just is like, and literally like a machine gun going at you, which is a really bad analogy, but it's just coming at you and you've got to duck. Instead, let's give this person a moment to think. What if we started doing activities? And activities are a beautiful way of doing things because we can share them. We can share them in that moment, and we can have them in between us, either in person or in between us online if you're doing this remotely. They work beautifully both ways. This is something called an empathy map. Many of you probably know what it is. It originated out of the D School, the design school at Stanford University in the United States. And instead, what I'm going to do is I am simply going to slide this in front of the person and go, hey, take a moment, fill this out. I'm going to give you about 2-3 minutes. Just jot down whatever you want to. Don't have to answer every question. Just get a few thoughts out of your head. That's a great way to start because then they actually have a moment to think. So here, this focuses on what did you think, what did you feel, what did you see, what did you do, who are influencers, what were pains and gains. And the beauty is they can just go at it. The other thing is that there's other benefits. I was so lucky because I asked Fernanda, who was one of our conference organizers, I said, would you fill this out for me so I had an example? So Fernanda said, sure, and then we started talking about it, and it was great. Because what she did was, she just wrote a few things down. She has no idea what my talk is about. But the next thing you know, we were able to converse back and forth about a bunch of things. What she was doing, how she sort of planned and talked to friends who had been to a particular area in Italy and why she talked to them. She went on in depth about those details. She also talked about lines. Oh my God, the lines were horrid. The beautiful thing is that when she did this and I was talking to her, how many questions do you think I asked? I really didn't ask anything. I just said one statement. I'm like, what'd you do? What'd you write down? What were you thinking? Go for it and start anywhere you want to. So she was able to fill this out. Now let's think about this for a moment. What's different? What's different between me asking all of those questions and what is different with me actually having somebody fill this out? There are benefits. For me, I actually don't say anything. It's the same statement over again. So what do you got? So what's going on? It's really easy, and it's not a leading thing. It's nothing. It's just out there, and you're asking somebody. It's also transparency into the types of questions we're trying to learn from people. You get that information, and it's not as if I'm trying to hide anything. When we hide, it's a really, really difficult place for the person on the other side to understand what is being hidden and why it's being hidden. This is not about playing games. This is about having an honest human conversation. Here's the other wonderful thing. It's an instant note-taking tool. You get people, I know, so sneaky, right? But it's awesome because they're taking notes, and what I tend to do is they keep a Sharpie if we're in person, and I print it out on a nice big piece of paper, super-sized font, so if anybody forgets their glasses in their old age or whatever it is, or can't see properly for whatever reason, no biggie. So what they do is they start to write, and then what we do is when we're talking about it, I also take notes. They also take notes. Hey, can I add this in too? Sure. It is now a conversation about whatever they want. And the best part of it is they can do whatever they want, however they want. And then there's no wording pressure. No, like, did I ask the right question? You know what the arc of the questions are, but you don't have to worry about exactly how they're worded. Let's talk about the participant then. The wonderful thing is they have a quiet moment to think. How many of you get quiet moments to think? Even in between meetings, I know my friends up here are smiling. Literally, it's hard, right? You don't get any moments. You're flying from one task to the next. It's really, really challenging. It's a moment of, oh my gosh, I can't even remember what just happened in the last meeting. This is how people are typically walking into our session. So it just gives them a very time-boxed sense of take a moment, collect your thoughts, put it together, tell us when you're ready. They can start wherever they want to. If I go back for a second even, and I show you this, I just was like, wherever you want to start, go ahead. What if feelings were really important to her? Oh, long lines, I heard about them, and then, oh, I had to experience them, really terrible. That's where Fernanda wanted to start. It's up to her. She can dictate where she wants to start. Therefore, no bias from my side. I'm still going to get all the information. And let's say they didn't put anything in the what do you say and do cell. No biggie. We can handle it. We just keep moving forward. We can ask afterwards, was there anything else you want to add? Oh, you know, or maybe sometimes they put something from one category into another. This is not about being dogmatic, guys. Literally, just let them mind dump. And it's a really beautiful way to get people to share all those details. They're in control of where to begin, and then we have a documented train of thought. I also like to note, they started with feelings, then they talked about behaviors, then they talked about influencers, and they talked about pains. I like to know what order they're unpacking this in. And then we realize there are a variety of ways to communicate then. We're not limited to just talking. We can actually draw. We can actually type. We can actually answer with words in a written statement. And it's a beautiful way of getting that discussion going. Just to be clear, this is not a new method. So for anybody who thinks, wow, this is a new method, nope, not a new method. It is simply some sort of stimuli that you're putting in between yourself and the participant. Is everybody with me so far? Awesome, awesome, I love it. Let's look at a few more then, because I know Bruno was like, they like examples. I'm like, examples it is. So what are other typical questions, right? How about tell me about yourself? How many of you love answering that question? And you're like, tell me about yourself. I'm crazy. I don't know, where do you begin? Where do you begin? So tell me about yourself. That's a really big one. What we tend to do is we ask people in advance to take a picture of one item in their home that tells us about who they are. Really simple, right? So if it's something that you're passionate about, it's great. I actually had a woman take a picture of the god-awful, ugliest pair of hiking boots, but her story just came tumbling out. I beat cancer, and I took these boots all the way up Kilimanjaro, and they will never leave me. What a powerful way to start, right? So much easier than saying, I'm one of 3 siblings, I guess, in my family. What do you want me to say? Like, there's just too much. But if they jump into a moment, all we're asking them to do is open up, is to get going. Tell us about something that's important to you. And this is great. This is, by the way, my Norco bush pilot that I got when I first got my first job, and I bought this baby, and it has gone around the world with me. And my kids still laugh at it because it's heavy as a beast, but it's the best bike ever. Extremes. How about this? When you're sort of like, tell me about the best experience and tell me about the worst experience. We've had those moments as well where we actually have to figure those two ends out. So if you're talking about easy, hard, best, worst, in the true sense of the word, we want to make sure that we always flip between participants so that we're never biasing with just easy first. So first time it'll be easy, hard, and then time it'll be hard, easy. That's a pain for researchers to keep a track of. So we just give them a little bit of a worksheet, a fun little worksheet that says, hey, just tell us about 2 memorable moments. What were they? And you notice the face is not filled in. They can fill it in. Thankfully, the person can see. They have 2 eyes. But other than that, You want to add in a nose. Some people add in hair sometimes just for the sheer fun of it. Sometimes doodling relaxes people. Go to town, take a few minutes and do it. It's not going to hurt you. But the best thing is, what's my point then? They're done, they put their pen down, and I go, what do you want to start with? That's it, that's all I have to say. Really alleviates the burden for me. Let's look at a few more. Relationships. How many times is it that you want to sort of ask somebody about something that they know about and then compare it in their worlds? Comparing it to somebody else, like, what about your friends? What about your family? How about the world? And you want to sort of open it up. Again, mentally, this is very hard to keep a track of. If you try to do it yourself, you might actually struggle and bounce back and forth. So there's a really nice tool called a social graph. This is borrowed from sociology and anthropology. But basically, it's just really simple. It's a whole bunch of concentric circles. And for the record, Stefan can vouch, I am not a designer. I can draw these things, though. I'm capable of doing this. So it's easy enough to pull it together and say, okay, write as much as you want to. And then guess what? Again, supersize the printout or supersize the mural or the Miro or whatever your tool of choice is, and then make sure that they can actually share that information. And then you start adding together. You add more. Oh, I didn't mention this. No problem, I've got you. I will start writing with you, or I will start typing with you. And it becomes this collaborative tool to unpack the variety in their story and not just look at it as a pointed piece of data. I think I have one more here. What would you like the process of selecting a health insurance plan to be like? How many of you are like that aspirational question, right? What do you want? What do you hope for it to be like? So we use metaphorical statements. Really simple. Where you start to think about, well, I find the process of it to be like this today. I'd like it to be like this tomorrow. My favorite, we did this with a client, and they said, I find it's like finding a needle, not in a haystack. I find it's like finding a needle in a pile of needles. Ugly, right? I would like it to be more like ordering a burger. The number 6, please. Why? It's not about, oh, great, Meena, what are you getting from that? I want to then deconstruct that. What is it about the needle and the pile of needles? Well, they all look the same. I can't tell the difference. I don't know what I signed up for. And it all comes tumbling out. But the burger is really clear. I get a soda, right? I get a really good burger, and I actually get extra fries on the side. Wonderful. It's very clear. So I want to deconstruct those attributes, and it's going to help, ultimately, the design team, especially. So I ask you to rethink the right question. Rethink it. People might think that research doesn't have creativity. There's so much creativity we can actually emphasize in our processes, because we want to think about ways to get people to talk to us. The quiet, the loud, the rambunctious, the very timid. What are we talking about? We have all sorts of people, or the distracted. There's so many different types of people we are meeting on a daily basis. Our job is to get them to unpack and take a moment to reflect. And the best feeling is when they go through these, they literally look at us and go, wow, I never realized I actually see things this way, because they don't have a chance to sit down and think about it. So this really gives them a moment of thought. So my ask of you, please do think about leveraging activity-based interactions. It really does make it more fun for you. Putting together the activities is awesome. If anybody needs any tips or any sites or stuff that we use for inspiration, please feel free to reach out. But it's just so much fun, and the moment you get people doing it, you'll find it's almost hard to end the session, because they won't want to leave. They just want to hang out and do more stuff, because it's fun. Not a bad thing to make it fun, too, right? Thank you so very much for your time. I really appreciate it.